There's a lot of things in the world that we could talk about right now, but this is one of the most important conversations that I want to have right now because I guess it's relevant considering the subject matter is lighting Twitter aflame and also just some general discourse that I've seen time and time again. This is nothing new, and I won't be the first person ever to talk about this, but I might as well right now so I can actually put a opinion out there. So, the show that we'll be referencing today is Nukitashi the Animation, which, for those of you who don't know, is basically an erotica anime that is currently airing. And it's not hentai, and it's one of those shows that people refer to, it's almost hentai, but it's not quite there. And, it's got a lot of sexually charged elements to it, but it doesn't seem to be focused on just the sexual interaction, obviously, as its premises, it's got a backdrop of sexual engagement. Sure, there's a lot of sexual innuendo, sexual names, things that are of sexual nature going on in the background, but it's not its main focus. Therefore, it cannot be, I guess, deemed a hentai. It must be deemed a erotica. And so, this raises a question for a lot of people in this show of how far are these guys willing to take it? Is this problematic media to just air on general television? And it's not airing on general television, by the way. It says right here that it's airing at 2:05 JST. Now, let's look that up right now. What is 2:05 JST to PST? That's 10 in the morning. Who the hell's watching this show at 10 in the morning in Japan? That's not a thing. Maybe this is incorrect according to Mal, but regardless, it seems rather obvious that people are not mad for the right reasons about this show, and I'm not mad about this show at all, because we've had our fair share of this over the course of history, and I am one of, I'd say I'm one of the select few who's openly vocal about my support of shows like Redo of Healer, and even naming Redo of Healer my top show of the decade so far, if you watch my previous video. So this is sort of me explaining why I have such a fascination with shows like this, and I like to see them done correctly because it actually advances the genre into something that is not this, which I think is sort of detaching itself from everything that I found in Redo of Healer to be interesting about taking absurd concepts and applying them to problematic issues that otherwise would not be funny or not be taken in such a lighthearted manner. So, question number one we have to ask ourselves is taking a serious and offensive topic and then making it completely laughable and unserious devalue the impact of that topic? And, in Redo of Healer, there is a lot of sexual assault, manipulation. There's even bestiality. There's a lot of incredibly sensitive and inappropriate topics that otherwise would not be enjoyable for a general audience because it is not enjoyable in general to subject yourself to, Only in a select few cases where you actually have the build-up to such an event, like sexual assault, in, for example, Berserk, which has been adapted, I don't know how many times, 3 times, 4 times maybe, several video games, you get it. You have to build up to that final moment, and that's, I guess, a spoiler, but who cares? In Redo of Healer, it's so blatant, so apparent, but taken to such a unbelievably blatant degree that I can't help but find it to reinforce the notion that none of this is serious and none of this should be taken serious because of how it sets up certain issues or certain characters to be taken unserious right off the bat. Right after the main character and Redo of Healer, Keiaru, has a complete torture session, which is incredibly violent and, hard to watch for some viewers, with the main girl, Flare. He brainwashes her and then renames her to Freya, which is pronounced in Japanese the exact same way as Flare. So instead of, calling her Flare, she's called Freya, as in Freya, like Norse mythology type thing. So, right off the bat, there are several signs to you, in the actual dialogue or in the actual structure of how these characters are set up that it's going to be stupid. Even more stupid is the fact that Keiaru, the main character, gets sexually abused and, completely made into this like this captive servant of of semen for how many years or how many months or whatever, right? And then in order to reenact his revenge after getting the Philosopher's Stone, goes back in time and then does it all again on purpose. But this time he's gonna set it up so that he can win in the end in a better way. So it doesn't quite add up to me why it has to happen that way. And it also doesn't make sense from a literal, like, why would you allow yourself to do that 2 times in a row, so to me, as long as you're taking the topic as it is, it doesn't mean it naturally has to lean into writing it into, wow, I have to take this topic seriously and I have to apply real world conscious morality to it, or else I am going to incur some well, you're not going to incur anything other than audience rage or audience distaste in your product. And if you watch an interview with the Anime Man and the creator of Redo Healer, the author of the series will basically tell you that he took all of the like top tags off of this like Dojin website or I forget, it's like a light novel website where you publish like your light novel. He took all the popular tags and then basically just wanted to create the most generic and popular series he could possibly make so he could make a quick buck or something like that. It's something along that lines. Don't quote me on that exactly, but that's like the vague idea he's going for. And, to that end, he did do exactly that. There is a significant amount of just genre tropes that are being used in the most generic way possible to continue to reinforce the idea that this show should not be taken seriously under any circumstances, or else you're buying into the gimmick. You have bought into the bait. That he's successfully rage baited you into consuming more of the show, so you'll continue giving him attention and you'll continue making his product popular enough so it gets an anime adaptation, which is exactly what it did. So, to me, that's like just tactical rage bait. And, kudos for that person because, obviously played his cards very correctly. And not to say that he's making light of the topics that he's doing in a exploitative and like way he's using for monetary gain. It's certainly not like the most recommended path that I think most people would say. Like you can build a brand off of your own original whatever. You can just build a brand off of whatever you want in a much more like mainstream appealing way, but that's not what he wanted. He wanted to do the mainstream appealing way in a much more like like circle jerk egotistic way, literally just taking the topics that everyone has ever talked about and then putting them all into one piece, and then also twisting the conventions in a way that makes it so you will see something you have never seen before, which is that the main character literally does all this stuff, in a lot of these series where it does portray the erotica with a main character that is often, along the lines of these get no hosed, get no money characters like Nagatoro or the Dress Up Darling show. It certainly feels as though those characters do not belong in an erotica show, whereas Kearu does not take that convention, and he actually acts against it in more of a Rants way. If you are familiar with the Rants video game series, I have personally not played the Rants video game series, but I've been told it's very similar to what you would get in Redo Healer. So, that is basically what we have to take into account here, the creator's intent. And if the creator's intent is not not trying to directly provoke an idea within you or try to stimulate some sort of emotion in you, even if it is anger or rage over the content that you're trying to do, that's a genuine strategy that you can employ, and I don't think that should be taken directly to the quality of the piece. You can definitely say you disagree with how the show is portraying this topic, and you don't appreciate how it is, making light of these topics, but it doesn't take away from the quality of the piece being so vastly different from the competition, in my opinion, at least, and also just how quality of an enjoyment or piece of entertainment, it's quality piece of entertainment on a just sitting in my chair level as well. If you're sort of into watching a lot of different genres and getting acclimated to what the actual trappings of those genres are, and then seeing, these people, break outside of it is interesting from time to time. Not always done well, not always interesting, but there's a lot to think about, especially in this erotica genre, because the emotion of sexuality is so visceral, so primal, that it almost makes it so it's the most personal genre to some people. Not that a lot of people watch the erotica genre in general, but it certainly evokes a very personal and primal emotion that every person has sort of ingrained into them. So the next idea that I think we should cover is, should we be ashamed or shamed for enjoying complex themes being completely disregarded in the name of entertainment? And my answer is no. I don't think there's a point in shaming people who like these type of shows, because, I mean, for the longest time, being an anime fan was something to be shamed in general. And I'm not saying I'm like the oldest anime fan of all time, and I wasn't around for any like real shaming, given that I got around to it in about like 2016, 2017, I want to say. So clearly I was way past that, but it certainly did not reach the heights that it is now, around where I was coming in. It only gets bigger as a concept. The whole zeitgeist of anime is a concept at heart, and people that are into it know whatever they want to know about it, and don't interact with some genres just like you would with regular film. And that's not to say that they should be disregarded. It's just to say, why bother shaming someone shaming someone for a genre you know nothing about? It all goes down to, you can mind your own business or not. I don't particularly care. I'm set in my ways, I guess, and I don't particularly care what anyone else thinks about what what shows I do and do not like. But I do take someone's opinion seriously if they have something interesting to offer about the piece that I already liked or disliked. That's something I would definitely change my opinion for if that was ever brought up. And I think there is a lot of muddying the waters in this case, because I see discourse on YouTube right now on specifically on the show Nukitashi. I know I haven't talked about it just yet, but I will get into it. I've seen a lot of discourse comparing it to Redo of Healer, saying that it makes Redo of Healer look tame, and it makes me want to shame those people, because I get it. I get why you want to shame people, but not for the same reason. I think that Redo of Healer is infinitely more a quality experience than Nukitashi, but I don't want to shame them for liking this show, because it is sort of funny in a way, but it's not to the same level as Redo of Healer in polish. That's my opinion. And when I say polish, I really do mean polish. Redo of Healer is not a very polished show at all. It has poor production. Animation quality is basically none, except in a few scenes. Maybe they'll incorporate I think the most animation in episode 9, which is the one I did an ironic video on, is literally the bestiality scene with the bull. That's literally it. That's the most animation you're getting in that episode. Otherwise, you're getting still frame pans. It's not a very interesting visual experience. It's not well produced. The only thing carrying it is really the absurd concept and the actual gravity behind what it's trying to do with the most generic things possible. And that's an enjoyable experience to me as someone who has seen a lot of generic things over the course of watching how many seasons of seasonal anime. And to me, Nukitashi has pretty poor production, still uses still frame pans, uses flashbacks from the same episode. In episode 1, there was literally reused footage, so there wasn't much for me to bite on in terms of, really anything other than really nothing other than, what it had to offer on a surface level comedic point. Whereas, there was a lot of names that were coded towards sexual, as I said before. They got names coded towards sexuality, like destinations that are very sexual. Literally the entire island is hashtag copulating. But aside from that, the concept is just okay. I don't see it going 11 episodes as it's listed, and I especially don't see me enjoying a show where the MC doesn't, bang all the hot women every second of the show. In a show where literally everyone on the island is banging everybody. That kind of fundamentally disrupts the process. And I get that, like, in future episodes he might do that, but it's sort of like, it doesn't make sense to me, to have a show so focused on the sexual element and then not sort of fulfill that, because the MC is just simply like irreverent towards the idea of sexuality because he comes from the outsider world where people are normal and people are more well adjusted to society. And so it sort of like doesn't make sense to me, because it's not absurd in that way. It feels generic because they are making the basic black spiky haired MC, be this indifferent person still. And so it really doesn't fall out of the trappings of the genre that I think it's sort of trying to break free from by including such blatant topics, but it's not engaging them in the same way that I think, a show like Redo Feeler would. And so when we're talking about the actual difference, that is what I'm talking about. Yes, they take two separate approaches to absurdity that make it clear where the quality or intrigue of the show is, but I don't think I can tolerate such malarkey to say that they are similar just because they're attached to the same genre. Just because Redo Feeler is an erotica doesn't necessarily mean that it should be attached to a show like Nukitashi, where the same degree of respect for the audience is not applied, And I don't know, I just feel like I had to get that off my chest because it is an interesting topic to have, and I don't have like an immense amount of stuff to say on it. I think I just sort of spitballed for most of this, but to think about our characters as a bit more than what they appear to be on screen isn't always necessary. I'm not saying that Kearu in Redo of Healer is the deepest, most enthralling thrilling character of all time. He literally is the character archetype that he is meant to represent, but just tweaked in ways that make him unlike the competition. Whereas I do not think the same can be applied to a show like this. So, take that as you will. Enjoy the show. Don't. It doesn't particularly matter, but I want to let you know that there are many other shows like this in the genre that do it a bit better and are way less there's less reasons to get rage baited over a show like this, because this is really not the most erotic show ever. I mean, just because there's sexual stuff doesn't mean that it's erotic, to say the least. It's more funny than anything. And I feel like there's a lot to explore in this genre that is not just worth wasting the breath to get angry about. And it's much more interesting to just compare shows like this in the genre, which is what I aim to do here. So thanks for watching, and have a jolly old day.